On 29 October 2018, Lion Air Flight 610 crashed in Indonesia. 189 people died. Less than 5 months after that, on 10 March 2019, Ethiopian Airlines Flight 302 crashed in Ethiopia. 157 people died. Both flights were operating the same aircraft, the Boeing 737 MAX 8, and that was not a coincidence. Today, we'll take a look at all the mistakes or wrongdoings that led to these crashes. The Airbus A320 competes with the Boeing 737 for the single-aisle airplane market. In 2010, Airbus announced that they would update their A320 with a bigger engine and called it the A320neo. The new engine would make the plane 15% more fuel efficient. The following summer at the 2011 Paris Air Show, Airbus sold a record-setting 667 A320neos in a single week, which was more than the 737 orders for the entire 2010. Even American Airlines, who had been buying Boeing jets almost exclusively for decades, decided to buy them. This pressured Boeing to come up with a quick solution. So they scrapped their initial plan to replace the 737 with a new plane entirely and just upgraded it with a new bigger engine and a few other tweaks, almost like what Airbus did with their A320neo, and herein lies the problem. The A320 is higher above the ground and have enough room to accommodate the new bigger engine under its wing. The notoriously low 737, however, do not have the same luxury. Boeing's quick fix to this was to put the new engine further forward and higher up the plane's wings, and this caused a new problem. With the new engine having bigger nacelle and its location being farther forward and higher, it produces lift of its own at high angle of attack. This lift causes a slight pitch-up effect because the engine is in front of the aircraft's center of gravity. The pitch-up effect reduces stick force, and that tends to make the pilot to exert more back pressure on the yoke, leading the aircraft towards stall. This is not allowed under FAR 25. To counter this, Boeing installed a program called the Maneuvering Characteristics Augmentation System, or MCAS. If MCAS detects that the plane's angle of attack is too high, it will move the elevator down to point the plane's nose down. Here's the problem. MCAS will do this automatically. It can do it without the pilot's input, and it will do it without even notifying the pilots. Normal electric trim control on the yoke can stop the MCAS-driven elevator movement. However, MCAS will activate again within 5 seconds after the switches are released if the angle of attack is still sensed too high. This is why you can see erratic up and down movements of both the JT610 and E3302 flights prior to their crashes. The only way to stop MCAS is by deactivating the automated electric trim and using manual trim. And if you're wondering why the pilots of both flights didn't do that, our next point will tell you the answer.
The A320neo's other big selling point was that the new model was pretty much the same as its predecessor, and therefore, pilots who were already trained to fly the A320 only required little additional training. Airlines loved this. They managed to save a lot of time and money by not sending their pilots to classrooms and multi-million-dollar simulators, and Boeing followed suit. The chief pilot for the 737 MAX program, Ed Wilson, said that pilots who were already certified to fly the old model only needed 2.5 hours of computer-based training, which turned out to be just a fancy name for iPad. And that iPad training didn't mention the MCAS. Pilots at United Airlines had to put together a 13-page guide to the 737 MAX themselves, which unfortunately also didn't cover the MCAS. Boeing didn't even mention the software in the Flight Crew Operations Manual, or FCOM, which governs the master description of an aircraft for pilots and is the basis for airliners' documentation and training. And the FAA agreed to all of this. Speaking of the FAA, during the 737 MAX's certification process, the FAA managers pressured their teams to delegate as much as possible back to Boeing.
Call it delegation or shifting, as you did. The fact is that the FAA decided to do safety on the cheap.
And the ones that were retained within the FAA were told to be rushed. The results of that rush review are clear. In the FAA's 30-page list of things that the new model differs or doesn't differ from other aircrafts of the same type, the MCAS is not mentioned even once, and yet even the seatbelts are in that list. The FAA also missed the fact that MCAS was much more powerful than the original design specifications. On paper, MCAS was only supposed to move the horizontal tail 0.6 degrees at a time, but after a few flight tests, Boeing changed that to 2.5 degrees out of 5 degrees maximum. Last but not least, the FAA failed to ensure that MCAS meet the required levels of redundancy. Based on FAA's rating of MCAS's possible failure condition, the software is supposed to have 2 levels of redundancy. We'll explain more in the next point. MCAS is just a computer program. The equipment that actually measures the plane's angle of attack is this tiny sensor called alpha vane. It can rotate because of the force exerted by the airflow, and its angle of rotation will tell the plane its angle of attack. There are actually 2 of them mounted on each side of the plane's nose. In both of the crashes, the sensors malfunctioned and gave conflicting readings. Alpha vane malfunctioning actually occurs more often than you would think. In fact, over the last 5 years, there were 50 commercial flights that experienced angle of attack sensor issues in the US alone. What's astonishing is the fact that Boeing would design the MCAS to receive data from only one of the 2 available alpha vanes. Not only that, a disagree warning light for the sensors was made to be an optional upgrade because it was deemed not critical enough for the safe operation of the aircraft, and even the FAA agreed to that. The black box data from the Lion Air crash shows that readings from the 2 sensors differed by some 20 degrees, not only throughout the flight but also while the airplane taxied on the ground before takeoff. All of these resulted in the loss of 346 souls. Some say the aviation rules are written with blood. Let's hope it won't have to be with our blood or our loved ones.